What's good with the YouTube? Y'all know it's Big Flacco, man. ACP, a convict's perspective, man. Trying to push a whole new line today, right? So please hit the like, subscribe, comment, and do all those things to help support this channel, and hit that bell notification for future fire content. Anyways, as you guys can tell, I'm doing a little bit new intro, man. I'm trying to change some things, get back on track. I should have my setup soon. I may have the weather bird in the back one day. I may have a different screen in the background the next day, and I'm gonna try to do a little bit more lives, and I got some interviews coming up as well. So before we get into this video, let me be clear. I'm not part of no YT streets. I ain't part of no YT yada. Whatever those vatos are doing, keep doing what you're doing. That's your guys' trip. That's your guys' mix. I'm not part of none of that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not against it, nor do I support it. That's cool. Do what you guys do. But I got to be clear. I want no part of it. Do what you do. You know, I'm not going to hate whatever amuses you. I just don't really want no part of it, man. I'm cool. I'm not part of that. Never was and never going to be. And ain't trying to be. So, let's get to the content now. Could all this beef and, social media, disses and all that, and podcasts and people discussing North or South and individuals, could there be ramifications for this? Could there be some repercussions? Could it pretty much carry over into the prison system? Instinctively, I would usually say on impulse, no. I think that prisons, streets are streets, but people forget the prison does run the streets. And there is a lot of people out there doing each other's biddings. And all it takes is, like I said, a bad day. Someone to wake up with a hair in their ass and just not care about what's going on, and just something gets set off. Just on instinct, Like the incident that happened in Pelican Bay, with Believer. No one thought something like that was ever going to happen. And that's pretty much been swept under the rug and no one's really talking about it. So, but with all this stuff recently going on, like I said, a lot of people are on the edge of their seats, not knowing what's going to come next, not knowing what group's going to do what next. The North for so long were not responding to any type of frivolous actions till they started to attack, individuals, till they started to try to dictate what the North could and couldn't do as far as, speaking on it. In there, even though there's an end to all hostilities and there's better relationships, not every yard pretty much functions parallel as far as the level of relationships that they may have with each other, being North and South. Like, Salinas Valley may be different than New Folsom and High Desert and Pelican Bay and on and on. So it's kind of hard to predict and be able to control every manpower that's under your domain and sit there and say that, nah, nothing's going to happen because of what happens out there in the streets. Now, the South, they're in a little bit more favorable position as far as being able to deal with this kind of stuff because, down south, the vatos go to war with each other. So your number one enemy, and there could be like decades of killings between these two groups. Once they get to prison, they have to rock and defend each other, and it's business. So the South Siders really know how to separate the streets from prison. The North on the inside were always fighting for their existence to establish yards to where Northerners could go to program. So they're just starting to get, a better routine for the gente, right? To where they have, programs, vocational jobs and whatnot. And they're out there getting their hustle, their money on, doing the things that people want to do on a established prison yard. So I don't think they want to go back to really risking that either. I will say this. They've been watching these channels for a long time. Southerners, Northerners, the big homies from both sides. And there's been a time period to where no one in good standings from the North really had a voice on YouTube. And there were times that active cats from down south with podcasts or with, rappers would speak on certain things that were disrespectful and derogatory towards the North. And there was no one from the North to sit there and really defend themselves against that. That would be considered in active good standings. I know a lot of dudes that have been upset about this, and they've also said that, man, these cats weren't talking all that shit when they were here. They were getting with the program, and that's what a lot of rappers have said, that have been on podcasts. Well, oh, that's in there. We're not in there. We're out here. Out here has a lot of influence on what goes on in there and vice versa. People forget that. It's been like that for years. There's not a bunch of NF members out there in the streets. There's not a bunch of MA members out there in the streets. There's those that are assigned to hold certain positions and duties and responsibilities for their, their areas, their territories, their regiments, whatever you want to label, depending on, which group you're talking about. And all that's being done on certain areas on the outside is basically being directed from those on the inside. There's no secret to what I'm discussing. I'm not exposing anything nobody knows. So to sit there at times and say, well, what happens on the streets is just the streets and prison's prison, that's not always true. Now, back to the question. Could anything happen based upon the fact of what happens on social media? Yeah, something could happen. You get the wrong individual disrespected or attacked or something that just isn't acceptable by one side. You could easily have something just kick off or whatnot. Or you could have some alcohol involved, right? People getting a little too drunk or on drugs in there, and someone watches a video of, Lefty Gunplay or some northern rappers dissing the South and whatnot, and it will piss somebody off. Next thing you know, they mouth off to somebody and you have an incident that happens. See, anything can happen. And I think people forget that when you go at certain groups or whatnot, those groups are still behind the walls. Those groups are still trying to coexist and get money and do their thing. And it would be unfortunate by someone's actions to affect them inside there. Now, besides, rappers from North being a little bit more aggressive and clapping back, let's look at some things that people aren't talking about. What's happened in the last 6 to 9 months that's different from like a year, 2, 3 years ago, right? You got the fellas in the feds that have pretty much taken back over pretty much control of the familia, and as well as the Norte Luchas and causes in the state of California. Since all that's happened, slowly you see the North starting to pretty much come out of their shell, speaking the way they want to speak in response to some of these dudes' actions, right? But there's still some solid relationships that are there too, I noticed, between some Northerners and Southerners. Like I said before, it's going to be that small nucleus of individuals that talking shit or talking out of turn that could create something bigger than what it needs to be. Now, I'm sure tensions are a little bit more up in prison, right? But I do know this. I don't think either side wants to be the culprit that's labeled for breaking this end of hostilities out there on these main lines. Nobody wants to sit there and say, well, it was the North's fault they did this, or it was the South's fault they did this. Even though personally I felt that the incident in the Bay was pretty much, in my eyes, an act of war, whether people agree with it or not. Once you touch someone that's not part of your political group in prison, that's an act of war, period. And I don't think that rule's changed. But like I said, nothing happened because of that. And like I said, that could be for a lot of numerous reasons, but I think what people are more focused on is generating money, making income. Nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to have violence. They're okay with cleaning their own messes, but they know that any type of war would really fuck up everybody's income. Just like in the end to all hostilities, it says when there's issues, right, they're supposed to basically come together diplomatically to work these things out. That's what the end to all hostilities was all about. And you have those that are in position of authority on all different sides for different groups that are able to do so, right, and speak for the whole group as one. What someone says on social media is not going to help anybody's pockets. But those that are out there, it's going to line up their pockets out here. So like I said, if anything's going to happen behind the walls, it's basically going to be a bad transaction, I believe. Or someone getting burned over some incident, or somebody getting jealous. Something to that nature is what's going to kick anything off on any one of these yards. It ain't going to have to really do with nothing out there in the streets. But if it was to have to do with any type of social media street stuff, I would like to think that there would be some alcohol and drugs involved behind the walls when whatever incident could occur. You know what I'm saying? But for the most part, like I said, man, both groups are trained to basically follow leadership. They make the rules. They make the regulations, they make the policies, whatnot. In lieu of whatever laws that you are obligated to, whether it be like a North Daniel who's obligated to the bonds and formats, the NF is still going to make those rules, whatever rule they want. They can change them as they please. Same thing with the big homies from down south. They make the rules. All of us could sit there and say, like, look, whether you're dropout, active, inactive, you can sit there and say, well, this is how it's supposed to be and this and that, right? No, it's not. It's what these guys feel it's going to be. And that's how it's always been. What needs to be swept under the rug will be swept under the rug. The cause and struggle for the North Daniels, as it was known to exist, does not exist anymore. It's basically everybody's part of a business enterprise that could generate a lot of money, and they want everybody to play some type of role in it. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's a small role or a bigger role, you know what I'm saying? It's all about one purpose now. The same thing with the fellas from down south. It's all about maintaining the control and power that they have and basically benefiting financially from all the foot soldiers they have that are loyal to them. That are going to get that grind on, get that money on, or have fucking money put on someone's books, or do this or do that. In numbers that they have, they're able to make a lot of shit fucking happen. Even though there's been numerous situations that have happened in prison to where it could have set some shit off. And probably should have been a couple of those incidents, right? But I'm not going to promote that. The fact that it didn't goes and tells you how committed and invested they are in this end of all hostilities. Now, besides the money part of it, right, there's another part that nobody's really talked about as much, and that is the non-designated yards, forcing groups to be out there with other groups that traditionally don't get along, or with what you would consider their trash. So that has to really play a huge role, because currently I think there's more SNY inmates than there is actives. So, you know what I'm saying? Force in numbers, put it that way. Force in the way that they conduct themselves, unity and prepare. But those numbers are going to mean something, because there's a lot of groups on that SNY side, and there's a lot of people in those groups that are really ready to show anybody on the active side what they're all about. As you see, it's 2024. Things have changed, and there's a lot more risk, you know, that's involved, that people could pretty much lose everything if they don't make the right choices and the right steps forward. You know, I mean, you got people that give some of these channels a little bit more credit than they deserve as far as how much influence that they could have on these main lines. None of us should really have any type of influence. It's like I said, it's a different world. We're just reporting on it. We're discussing on it, whether it was something that happened in 1968 or something that happened in 2024. But in any event, I don't think any of us are trying to guide or mold the hand to go a certain direction, or this is what you need to do, because if anybody's listening to that, man, they're giving some individuals on here way more power than they deserve. Now, I do know that there's been a few people that they've had more on their target list, more on their radar, and that's just based upon their actions and just some of the content that's been reported, you know. Sometimes some of the stuff people discuss on here could be very, very sensitive. Now, let's just keep it 100. That's why I always watch what's necessary, I feel, and what's not necessary when discussing a particular topic or a particular individual. We'll say this: if ever there was going to be any instance that were going to occur based upon content, it probably would be the stuff that we've been seeing like the last 6 months. The fact that we're not seeing it goes to show how much control and discipline that they have up in there, just to pretty much void out what they're hearing out here. And like, a lot of people are tuned in, tapped into certain people because they're funny, they're characters, it's entertaining. Others are in it because there is a lot of accurate information and historical information that a lot of people are interested in. You know, like I said, different people walk a different walk when they're in prison. Different people walk with different groups when they're in prison, and different people have different obligations to those groups while they're in prison. You know, I know in there, you know, in regard to the northern channels, they're all called basically basura or trash, PC or NGN or dropout channels, right? As far as for the north. So I'm pretty sure that they pretty much have filtered out, you know what, don't take any of this information that you get from some of these channels as accurate, woo woo woo. And so I'm pretty sure Manpower know, you know, they know when they watch who's legit and who's actually speaking facts and who's speaking just from a place where they don't know nothing. They know when they watch, right? So they're able to decipher all that. Same thing with the Southerners. You know, I'm pretty sure that they let their people know that whatever this rapper or this person's doing on out there, man, is not going to affect us up in here. You know what I'm saying? Let him get his shine on and get his money on. They're clout chasing for money out there, all these groups, they probably think. I think now that both sides know that there's no way to change anything. You know, the social media thing has evolved, and that they know they can't get rid of it. So now you're starting to see different podcasts from different individuals that are even active now. But I will tell you this, I do see in the near future there being more cases that are social media related that happen. Whether it's beef that happens if someone gets got out there on the streets, or just funk, or whatever it may be. I guarantee you that's the next thing we're going to see more of now, is that. And the one thing we got to worry about is this, and I mentioned this before the other day. You know how serious the drill rap got in Chicago, where they're just murking everybody. The thing is, up north, right, and down south, is there's such a distance from each other. I don't see that happening between the north from up north and south from down south. But if you notice, the last few months, there's been a rise of activities of northerners going at it with upstaters. And with people speaking so freely, right, on here, you know, north and south, I could see that some of that be related to the social media and the stuff that people put out there, that it could trigger people out there on the streets. That's what people have to worry about, that right there. With that said, it's your boy Flacco from a convict's perspective. I'm gone.